and I'm delighted, I'm sure you will be also, to know that Maggie Oliver has also joined us in the studio. She's a former Detective Constable with Greater Manchester Police and, of course, a whistleblower on the Rochdale grooming gang case. When we talk about police covering up these horrendous crimes, not Maggie Oliver. She was one of the police officers who went, I need to leave my job, give up my livelihood and the career I love so that I can speak out on this, because there is such an awful cover-up going on. And Maggie Oliver, we salute you once again for your amazing work there, running your own fantastic charity now, helping us, and lots of other things, all about helping the victims of this. Just let's get back to brass tacks here. Louise Casey, put in charge of this audit, hard-hitting, straight-talking. Was there anything in that 200-page report that you didn't already know?
Good morning, Julia. Absolutely nothing. And virtually everything in there, a lot of it I put in an actual report to the Home Office back in 2013, including we need to record the ethnicity and the culture and the religion of these rapists.
Why was that so important?
Because that's what underpins this gross criminal neglect that the country has witnessed for decades. You know, tiptoeing around the sensitivities around the perpetrators, but also, Julia, around the fact that most of the children who have been subject to this abuse are from difficult backgrounds and nobody cares about them.
Well, 2/3 were in social care, we understand, and Louise Casey actually sort of points out at one point that, look, you know, no one kind of really noticed that they went missing for days or weeks on end. You know, and it just wasn't really taken very seriously because, well, they always come back. Yeah, they come back bloodied, bruised, clearly drugged, exhausted, you know, sometimes pregnant, but hey-ho, nothing to see here. When, of course, you know, if our kids went missing for a couple of hours, we'd be onto the police.
Juliet, when I joined the police, I was 41, 42 on the day I swore my oath of attestation. I've got 4 kids. So when I first started, every police officer does 2 years in uniform. And I was being sent, as a woman with 4 kids, I was sent to all the missing from homes. Yeah. I was sent to all the cases that were rapes. I could not get my head around why it was just a paper exercise when an 11 and a 12-year-old child would go missing every weekend and they'd be seen as a nuisance, and the staff in the care home would say, oh, they've gone. They'd pick the phone up, report them missing.
Because they had to do that.
Because they had to do it. But nobody took responsibility. And the reason was because nobody would pay to put them into secure accommodation. So I was horrified from the start.
So we haven't got the budget, nothing's going to happen, no point. We'll have to go through, we'll go through the motions, we put a report in, and then the police go through the motions of pretending to care, pretending to investigate, but they don't really do anything. But we know that there were people working in care homes. We know that there were parents, because this was happening to kids, you know, from, it's awful, you know, good homes, but you know what I mean, like loving family homes where, you know, kids are sort of, you know, got groomed and have these sort of so-called, you know, boyfriend, lover boy. There's this technique they use, sort of buying them gifts, paying them attention, getting my fast car, and then it's drink, then it's drugs, then it's all, you know, then I'll have sex with you, then then, can you have sex with a mate, you know, and then it all spirals into horror. But we know that there were people, there were parents, and there were people, good people who worked in these care homes and social workers who were speaking up. What happened when they did that?
Like me, you know, I did speak up when I was a serving police officer, and I was told, Maggie, senior officers make decisions. If you can't do as you're told, you're in the wrong job. Well,
and did they tell you why? Did you say, right, okay, but this is an 11-year-old, and I'm thinking,
absolutely.
And you weren't suspecting? Were these 11-year-olds saying, or 13-year-olds, you know, I'm being raped?
You know what, Julie? As a human being, I didn't need them to tell me. If I picked up a child in a car, a 12-year-old child with 4, 60-year-old men, and the child's drunk, I would be saying, why? If you can't have those questions, you shouldn't be a police officer. But what I would say, Julia, is for me, the book with this stops at the top.
I know, I want to go to that.
At the top.
But at the time when you were saying, look, I'm a mum, I wouldn't let this happen to my kids, you wouldn't let this happen to your kids, why are we not doing anything? I've got the licence plate of the guy who was twice her age who was driving her. I've got the IDs of all the guys in the car with her. Why are we not prosecuting? What was the response, other than, don't worry your pretty little head about it, Maggie?
You know what? There was just people turning a blind eye, turning away. And when
did they say explicitly, we're not going to deal with this because they're Pakistani or Muslim, or were they saying,
no.
yeah, we'll deal with it, and then nothing happened?
No. By the time I got to the point where I really saw what was going on, and I went to the Chief Constable, he just sent me away. He would never meet me. He sent me like an insulting, like 4-letter email. If lessons have to be learned, we'll learn them.
Yeah.
In other words, you know. And then when I went public, he accused me of being too emotionally involved.
How dare you get emotional about girls being raped?
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, a woman who'd been bereaved. He'd met me on many occasions, and I know that I've said this many times before, but that's the attitude that somebody like me would have to face. And I took the unusual step of deciding that this was so important that I was ashamed of what I was seeing, and if I didn't try my absolute best to expose this, I was as bad as them.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there are many people who think like I did, but they don't give up the job. We shouldn't have had to give up our job.
Exactly.
And, you know, Louise Casey came to me in February, and we connected from the moment we met, and then she came back to me to put together a group of survivors from all around the country. She would not have come to me if she did not want the truth. What I can't get my head around is why, after all the years that I've been banging this drum, why she was entrusted with this task, because
exactly, that's exactly my thought. This is my thing. Keir Starmer knows her, okay? You know, she's a Labour baroness. Everyone knows that she's a straight shooter, okay?
Yeah.
And as soon as she was put in charge, they went, oh, this is going to be a game changer. Only weeks ago, you know, people who were talking about needing to have a national public inquiry were being told you're jumping, you know, it's whistle, you know, racist, you know, whistle type to politics. The Prime Minister himself talked about Tories jumping on a far right bandwagon. Yeah. Suddenly, they do it. It's absolutely acceptable. Has anything actually changed?
No. I mean, what Louise has done, she has honestly reported the issues that have led to generations of children being raped on a daily basis.
Here's the thing. Is there even a scintilla of a possibility that either the Yvette Cooper, the now Home Secretary, former shadow, been involved in politics from word go for years, that the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, who by the way, was actually the Director of Public Prosecutions.
I know.
Is there any possibility at all that either of those people weren't fully aware of all of this information if they've been paying the tiniest bit of attention?
There is not one single doubt in my mind that they know full well and knew exactly what was going on. When I worked in Rochdale, Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions. He is the man at the top of the CPS who authorised the man who got a 13-year-old child pregnant, where we had a fetus, where we had DNA. He authorised that man to be charged with conspiracy to commit sexual activity.
Well, we know he had sex with her, and if it's 13-year-old, it's statutory rape.
Well, it's under the law. It actually technically isn't if you're over 12, but no, up to 12 there is no argument. Yeah. My understanding is that now we are going to be looking at making it statutory rape, possibly up to 16. But you're never going to get more evidence than we had on that case. He was Director of Public Prosecutions.
It wasn't a he said, she said.
Nope, he was there.
So you talked about this going all the way up. So it's not just even all the way up just to Chief Constables. We also know there's an issue with local council leaders and local councillors. There have been cases where some of the people who've been implicated in these actual grooming gang rape crimes, who working for the local council. Or we've got some MPs now who are council leaders who are possibly involved with cover-ups as well. No doubt they'll be, I hope they are, certainly called before any public inquiry that comes forward. How high up do you believe this goes? And what were their motivations to cover up?
I think that the motivations are they didn't want to rock the multicultural boat, and these children don't matter. And they're probably
So it was kind of white working class girls don't matter.
Yes.
But also we need to this idea about community cohesion. Look, you worked in these areas as a police officer.
Yeah.
Were local Muslims, local Pakistani women, men, community leaders, were they not equally horrified? I don't believe for a moment they would not be equally horrified by these awful crimes.
Well,
or was that an issue that actually that was part of the cover-up?
I'm going to say something now that probably will be a little bit controversial. When I was in Greater Manchester Police, any cases like this were being assessed by what were called IAGs, independent advisory groups. And people in those groups were members of the Muslim community, and they were advising the police forces which cases to prosecute and which not.
Why?
Because
Why?
they didn't want to cause racial, they didn't want to disturb racial cohesion. But right from day one, I have always said any child abuser is equal. The law is equal, and we charge them with rape. But with this particular kind of crime, they have not done that because I don't believe they wanted to uncover that hot potato. But
and the idea, Louise Casey mentions in the report, she says, this concern that this would give ammunition to racists. It's like, she says, look, the racists are going to be racist anyway. This is something, the point.
I mean, I've said in my book, even Julie, that by pushing this conversation underground, they actually have allowed the far-right racists to hijack the conversation when it should be about child protection.
Yes.
It should not be about, oh, well, we can't do that. And the actual truth is, as we see unprecedented numbers of immigration and immigrants coming in who do not share our values, it's going to get worse. Just one more thing, sorry. The other thing is that in the foundation, the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and in my work, there are women within that community who are treated as second-class citizens.
Yeah.
I think we have a duty to fight their corner.
100%.
Women's rights, if they're living in the UK, they shouldn't be hiding behind a front door.
But, and everything then becomes, well, it's a religious or a cultural difference. But there shouldn't that shouldn't be that. If you want to live here, that's not the deal.
And some of those women come to the foundation because they have nowhere within that community to go.
Yeah.
So once you start to grasp the nettle, you do so much good for other women.
Yeah. But for those who are tied into the whole, no borders, multiculturalism thing, they can't deal with this. They have to put their blinkers on, because once they see it, they can't unsee it, and then that's why they shout racist and far right at anyone who covers this. Because this is the thing that we've had these claims again and again. The vast majority of people who commit sexual abuse of children in this country are white. Well, of course they are. It's a white majority country, but in the particular towns and cities where it's been exposed, and there's only a handful of them compared to the 50 we believe it's happening in, is the predominance in this particular modus operandi of grooming and rape gangs, and there's these sort of the selling and selling of these girls around like they were pieces of meat, is quite clearly, and it's not Asian, it's Muslim Pakistani men, largely from ethnic origin and particularly from a particular part of Pakistan where they have, in my view, medieval views about women and about children. Yeah. And we've imported that. And we know we've had mass immigration from that part of the world since this was first exposed. Many people in this field are saying it's not only that the problem has not been resolved and it's not a historical issue, it's happening now, but that it may be worse now than it was 15 years ago. What do you say to that?
It's different. The grooming methods are different. That's moved online. But
they get them online, but then they get them in real life.
I'll tell you one case that we've dealt with in the foundation. But the issue is that I highlighted back in 2013 to the Home Office Select Committee is that nobody wants to collect the data. How can you have a meaningful conversation or understanding if there is a deliberate attempt to muddy the waters?
And two-thirds of cases they didn't have their identity.
Well, they never do, and all the
why wouldn't you? You sign up for a library card at the local council, you have to give your ethnicity.
Yeah, they will not. They just didn't want to, and every police force has a different method of collecting, so it's useless information, and that's why we keep going around the same rabbit hole about, but most abuse in this country is by white men living in the home. Yes, I know it is. But in this particular kind of crime, it is predominantly Muslim men.
We can tackle both. We should be tackling both.
It shouldn't matter.
Tell me about this one individual case.
Well, we in the foundation we had a case where a granddad came to us, and his little girl was 11, and had been groomed on her phone. 11. And they kept hearing the phone beeping, took the phone away from the little girl, and when they looked at it, there was all these messages, indecent photographs from this little girl, but when they read through the messages, they They pretended to be a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Then they're blackmailing her to go and meet them, and if she doesn't, we're going to share it with your family, with your school friends. The granddad saw this, called the police. Police went round, and you know what they did, Julia? They walked into that house, up to the little girl, said to granddad and dad, we don't want to speak to you, we want to speak to her. Went over and said to her, don't say anything. I want to tell you that by sending those photographs online, you are guilty of criminal offences. But delete it all and we won't do anything. Well, Grandad came to the foundation, but behind that one person was a gang of men in other countries. They were trying to coerce that little girl to meet somebody. Then they would have raped her and passed her on, and the recruitment, the grooming, came from out of the country, so the police actually couldn't do anything about it. But the reality is that that's how things have progressed.
Yeah.
So you act...
How sophisticated, isn't it good? They're using technology. I'm sure the government would be proud.
And the police are not up to the standards of technology.
Every single one of those police officers needs to be sacked on the spot.
And I agree, and that's why I shout about it, because actually you don't have to be a police officer to know that an 11-year-old child is not a criminal. They are a terrified child.
And we had 4,000 under 18-year-olds who've been prosecuted for prostitution and other crimes when they were clearly victims. And you can't be a child prostitute. It's not a thing. No. You're a victim of rape.
But I see that every day, Julia, in my work in the foundation. So these are not historical cases. No. It's now, and that's what kind of fires me, because the human consequences of the gross criminal neglect of those at the top is shameful. It is unforgivable, and they should be in prison. And yet we're having another national inquiry. Who will lead it?
That's crucial.
What are the terms of reference? How long is it going to take? I was involved in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, the other public inquiry,
by
Alexis J.
Yeah.
7 years, hundreds of millions of pounds, 20 recommendations sitting on a shelf, still not in. So yesterday the government got a pre-action protocol letter from our legal team, my legal team, saying that we are taking the government to a judicial review to implement them. That's a first step.
They said they were going to do it. They didn't. Well, the Tories said they'd do it. They haven't done it. Labour have said they'd do it. They haven't done it.
Well, we served papers in January.
Brilliant.
And they had to. They had to publish a timeline, and in that timeline they haven't committed to implement any, even things, Julia, like pain compliance against children. They won't criminalise, or they won't outlaw that. No Minister for Children in the Cabinet. No mandatory recording of ethnicity. All these things that took 7 years. The grooming gang strand was a whitewash.
Yeah, it was 5 days. You didn't get to give evidence. None of the women who'd been abused.
So my question is, what will be different about this one? This is a PR exercise right now.
That's the key thing. And also a report, Yvette Cooper was talking about it being reporting in 3 years' time. Well, that's just for a general election. What you're going to have a report that basically says, and as we know, a lot of Labour-run councils are implicated. The Labour-run councils, by the way, now a lot of those Labour leaders, now MPs. Yeah. And you're going to have that damning report, really?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Also, again, another report to tell us what we already know.
I don't need a report, Julia. I mean, I know victims and survivors want this inquiry. They're not where I am. I put all those years of my life trusting Alexis J. For what? This can go ahead. I'm not stopping the work that we do in the foundation.
But your foundation, you've been doing a crowdfunder. We spoke about it on the show before. You getting money. Seriously, I'll retweet it again. Yeah. This is a really worthwhile cause. Got a team of lawyers.
Yes, and barristers.
Barristers basically looking at prosecuting, because there is the evidence.
There is.
Police won't do it. Sod them. We'll bring private.
The CPS will never charge a senior police officer or a senior social worker.
So this isn't about going after the perpetrators of the actual abuse. It's the people who covered it up.
Yes, because for me that's the bigger problem. And if you listen to the victims and survivors that we support every day, that I have spoken to over many years, the abuse is horrific. But what destroys them is that when the authorities turn a blind eye, they feel completely alone. And that is where, as a country, we should hang our heads in shame.
Absolutely.
And I wish I'd not had to do what I've done, and I know I get flack sometimes, but you know what?
Never here. We love you.
Do I care? I don't, because I'm speaking the truth. And those who don't like it, are the ones who should have done something about it.
Absolutely. And also when you tell, you know, that one story you told us about that 11-year-old, and I can see the faces of my colleagues, particularly colleagues who's also got a child.
I mean,
and the reaction,
I can bring that
and
dad
that's
on.
happening on a grand scale, and it's happening right now,
100%.
today, to thousands of
100%.
girls and boys,
Yeah.
and it's happening right now, and no one's doing anything about it, because when, again, the person sending those messages, that little girl, will be doing it to hundreds of girls.
I mean, I can bring that granddad to speak to you, maybe. He has never spoken out, Julia.
I would be very, very, I'd be very honoured to.
You know, it's incredible, some of the things that go on. Now,
is that part of the issue, is that people don't want to know, to admit that people can commit such heinous crimes, and they also don't want to believe that the authorities that are there, that we would count on to protect us in our time of need, can't be trusted?
I don't think it's people. I think the people know. I think the public know, and I've said somewhere, I can't remember where because I've spoken a lot, but for me, I listened to a bit of that debate in the House of Commons.
It was absolutely
They
waste
are
of time.
like school children. Stop scoring party political points. This is children's lives.
Amen.
You know, Conservatives are equally negligent. Get together, resolve the problem. Don't be covering it up and corrupt. Get a grip and solve it. And now I think the public are demanding that, actually.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go away. So, but it's still putting our trust in people who behave like that in the House of Commons is terrifyingly scary, because they're in charge of our country, and watching them like that, I feel like I'm in a school playground.
I was disgusted.
I am
by what I saw yesterday.
I am just horrified. You know, apologies. You can apologise for something you didn't know about. You knew. So an apology will never cut it. You should be in prison, actually, because if you can't trust those who are responsible for our public services and protecting children, who can you?
Yeah, if you're a police officer, particularly a chief constable, if you're a social worker, you're working in a care home, or you're a teacher, and what the hell are you doing in that job if you don't want to help the victim of a rape gang? What the hell are you thinking?
How do we reverse that culture?
I think we need a lot of people going to prison.
I think we do. I only want one, because then the message will go to all of them that it might, you know, the current people, it might be me in 10 years facing this, and I might not get my pension.
Yeah. But you know what? Wouldn't it be nice if they just did the right thing because it was the right thing to do? That's the bit I think we're all so flabbergasted by. Maggie, you did the right thing. We love you. I know our audience would just appreciate everything you've done. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about this.
And actually, you know, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic. Lots of people never wanted to, but you have.
Well, you've given us the tools to try and get that information out, and you've been a fantastic campaigner. I feel privileged to know you. A former Detective Constable, Greater Manchester Police, whistleblower on the Rochdale grooming gang case, Maggie Oliver. Huge thank you to you for coming in as well. Sam Armstrong, just a brief response to you from that, listening to what Maggie's had to say.
Well, one of the MPs that was behaving so disgustingly yesterday was Sean Davies, who was in a previous life the leader of Telford Council, and in that
now a Labour MP.
Now a Labour MP, stood up, made a party political point in the House of Commons. When he was leader of Telford Council, he'd written a letter to the Home Secretary saying there should not be an inquiry into the grooming gang scandal that was going on in that town. This is the problem that we're facing. Almost everybody in authority has risen up through the ranks, covering up this national scandal, and now they're in a position of power, and we're relying on them, the guilty men, to expose themselves, and that's why I fear more cover-ups.
I don't trust it for a second. I really don't.